Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I was 63 when the question finally occurred to me. Is this all there is? I had been married to Michael for nearly 40 years, and we'd built a life that felt steady and predictable. We lived in the same suburban house we'd bought when the kids were small, we had the same circle of friends we'd known for decades, and every day felt like a comfortable repetition of the day before. For a long time I thought that was enough. Then one evening, a single phone call cracked the shell of that comfortable routine, leaving me to wonder how many other truths I'd been ignoring all these years. It started, as these things often do, entirely by accident. Michael had gone to bed early with a headache, so I was alone in our living room, flipping through channels and half paying attention to some late-night news program. The day had been ordinary. We'd had pasta for dinner, chatted about our grandson's upcoming school recital, and then parted ways. Me to the couch, him to the bedroom. At 63, I didn't expect life to change in monumental ways. But then the phone rang. It was nearly 11, a strange hour for calls, so I turned down the TV and answered with some concern. A woman's voice, hushed and tentative, asked if she could speak with Michael. She sounded slightly older, her tone not exactly distressed but carrying an urgency I couldn't place. My first thought was that it might be a coworker, but Michael had retired 2 years ago from his position as a financial consultant, and his old colleagues rarely called this late. "He's asleep," I said, keeping my voice polite. "May I ask who's calling?" For a moment, there was only the faint crackle of the line. Then she murmured, "I'm sorry. It's late." I shouldn't have called, and hung up before I could ask anything more. I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand, unsettled. My first instinct was to let it go. Maybe it was the wrong number, or a missed dial, or some old acquaintance with the unfortunate habit of calling late. But something about her voice tugged at me, the way she paused before speaking as if she were struggling with something. When Michael woke up the next morning, I casually mentioned the call. He froze for a fraction of a second, his eyes flicking up from the newspaper. A woman. Did she leave a name? I shook my head, watching his expression carefully. No, she sounded surprised to hear me though, and hung up. He blinked, then forced a short laugh. Must be a telemarketer who forgot the script. I could tell he was deflecting. After nearly 4 decades together, I knew his little cues. The faint line that formed between his brows, the way he cleared his throat when he was nervous. Something was off. I asked if there was anyone from the old office who might be calling him. He shrugged and said he doubted it. Life went on, apparently unchanged, but a restlessness anchored itself in my gut. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to dismiss my unease. Yet every time Michael's cell phone buzzed or rang, I found myself listening carefully. Did he sound flustered? Was he stepping out of the room to talk? I caught him deleting texts more than once, and each time, he insisted it was just spam. But the pattern repeated often enough that I grew suspicious, though I told no one, not even my closest friend Dorothy. One autumn afternoon, after Michael had left to run errands, I went into our home office to grab a stapler. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I suppose it was inevitable once I discovered his phone lying on the desk, unlocked. He'd always been protective of his phone, but we never officially hid things from each other. I stared at it for a few seconds, telling myself this was a breach of trust, but curiosity won out. My hand trembled as I tapped the messages icon. Most were mundane. Updates from old friends, random group chats. Then I found a conversation labeled with a single initial, L. The messages began innocently enough, references to old jokes I didn't recognize, mentions of a long time since they'd last spoken. Then a line that set my heart pounding. I'm in town next week. Will you see me? Michael's response read, let me think about it. It's complicated. Another message. I can't stop thinking about those days. You remember the cabin? Followed by Michael's short reply. Yes, but things are different now. The conversation ended with a date and a question mark, presumably a proposed meeting. My stomach twisted. This wasn't the sort of chat one had with a random friend. My mind reeled with questions. Who was Elle? What was the cabin reference? Was Michael planning to see this person in secret? I put the phone down, carefully locking it again, then paced around the office, feeling a prickling sense of betrayal and disbelief. Had we been so distant that Michael felt the need to reconnect with someone else from his past? A memory flickered through my mind. Years ago, early in our marriage, he'd once mentioned a summer fling before we met, a woman he'd traveled with through northern woods. But that was eons ago, and he'd never spoken about it again. Was that woman Elle? That evening, I couldn't bear to confront him immediately. I cooked dinner in a daze, playing the role of a dutiful wife, my heart pounding behind a brittle smile. He complimented the meal, asked about my day, and I nodded along, performing normalcy. After he fell asleep, I lay awake, staring at the dark ceiling, wrestling with the realization that maybe our life was more fragile than I'd dared to admit. Over the next few days, I tried to watch for signs that he was indeed planning to see Elle. On Thursday, he claimed to be meeting an old coworker for lunch. Something about his tone told me that wasn't the full truth. He left, looking more anxious than usual. I waited an hour, trying to quell the guilt that rose in me. Then I got in my car and drove to the address I'd spotted on his phone's calendar app, an address he'd typed in next to the date from those messages. It was a small cafe in the next town over, one we never went to as a couple. I parked across the street, feeling like some amateur detective, heart thudding against my ribcage. Sure enough, after half an hour, I saw Michael step out of his car. He wore a nicer shirt than he usually bothered with, and he kept looking at his watch. A few minutes later, a woman approached, silver-haired, poised, wearing a long coat. They exchanged a tentative smile, an awkward embrace, and then disappeared into the cafe. I stayed in my car for a good 20 minutes, uncertain what to do. A swirl of anger, betrayal, curiosity, and heartbreak tangled in my chest. Eventually, I mustered the courage to slip inside the cafe. I felt foolish and humiliated, but my desire for truth outweighed my pride. The place was small, with only a handful of tables and one window. Michael and the woman were seated in the corner, leaning in close, their expressions earnest and intense. The woman reached out and placed her hand on his, and something in me twisted so sharply I nearly gasped. I wasn't sure if they saw me. I ducked behind a display of pastries, my heart hammering. But their focus was on each other. I heard bits of their conversation, references to the cabin, how they couldn't go back in time, how they both had regrets. My eyes stung. This was more than a casual lunch. I retreated, tears blurring my vision. Some part of me wanted to storm over, make a scene, demand an explanation, but another part was too shaken. After nearly 4 decades of marriage, was I just a bystander in my own life? I drove home numb. That night, I confronted him. He didn't deny it. He said her name was Laura, an old flame from his youth, someone he'd been engaged to before we ever met. They had parted ways under complicated circumstances. She wanted to travel the world, and he thought he needed a more stable life. She married someone else, and so did he. But now, after her husband passed away, she'd reached out to check on him, to see if they could find closure. Closure, I repeated bitterly. You've had 4 decades to get closure. Michael cradled his head in his hands, apologizing repeatedly. He claimed he never meant to hide it, that it just happened so quickly and he didn't want to worry me. He insisted they were simply catching up, that yes, they shared old memories, but it wasn't an affair. You have to believe me, he pleaded, his eyes red. It's just old feelings that flared up, not something that threatens our marriage. But it did threaten our marriage. Because in that moment, I realized there was a part of Michael I never knew, a part that still yearned for the roads not taken. And I saw, for the first time, how carefully we'd tiptoed around each other for years, not voicing deeper wants or dissatisfactions. I told him I needed space. He slept in the guest room for a while, though I think we both barely slept at all. I felt untethered, like my once stable life had lost its anchor. Where was the husband who used to bring me wildflowers from the backyard, who used to talk to me about our future? We had grown old in each other's presence, but maybe we'd let the best parts of ourselves slip away. Days later, I found the courage to ask about the cabin. He admitted it was a place they'd once rented in upstate New York, back in their early 20s. They'd spent a summer there, talking about a future that never materialized. Then life pulled them apart. He wouldn't go into details, only saying that part of him never forgot how carefree he felt back then, how he believed anything was possible. The heartbreak in his eyes told me he was mourning more than just a lost love. He was mourning a lost version of himself. "What about us?" I demanded. "Did you never feel that sense of possibility with me?" He shook his head, despair etched into his features. "You gave me a beautiful life, Linda. We had children, we traveled some, we built something real. But sometimes I wondered what if. And when Laura wrote to me, it made me realize that I've been coasting along, never questioning if we were truly happy or if we just settled into routine." Each word cut me to the core. Was I guilty of the same? Had I been so busy telling myself that a calm, routine life was all I wanted, I never bothered to check if we were both fulfilled? That night I called my daughter Samantha, hoping for comfort. But I ended up sobbing into the phone, telling her more than I intended. She listened quietly, then hesitated before saying, "Mom, if he wanted to leave, don't you think he would have by now? Maybe you two just need to talk, like really talk, not the polite stuff we do in everyday life." I knew she was right, but fear and pride held me back. Eventually, though, Michael approached me with a proposition, that we rent that same cabin all these decades later, just the two of us, for a weekend. "I need to face these memories," he said softly. "I want to be honest with you about what that part of my life meant, and show you that it's in the past. Maybe we can figure out if we still have a future together." I was appalled at first. Why would I want to spend time in the place he once shared with another woman? But then I realized maybe that's precisely what we needed, to pull the ghosts out of the shadows, to speak the unsaid words. Against my better judgment, I agreed, telling him that if at any point I felt it was too much, I'd leave. The drive upstate felt surreal. The roads were narrower than I expected, flanked by tall trees that filtered the sunlight. Michael was quiet, his hands tense on the steering wheel. I stared out the window, recalling our early years, how we moved into our first tiny apartment, the way he used to surprise me with small acts of kindness, the nights we dreamed of traveling to places we never got around to seeing. The cabin was small and rustic, perched by a serene lake. The autumn leaves painted the surroundings in golds and reds, a breathtaking sight that felt at odds with the turmoil in my chest. Inside, the furniture was worn, the walls adorned with family photos of whoever owned the place now. We settled our bags in the single bedroom, awkwardly acknowledging that we had to share this space. "You okay?" Michael asked, voice gentle. I nodded, though my heart fluttered with anxiety. That first day, we walked around the lake in silence. Eventually he started talking about how he and Laura were just kids back then, spinning fantasies about living off the land, traveling abroad, making art. How, when she left, he felt abandoned but also relieved. "I realized I wasn't the free spirit I pretended to be," he said. "I wanted stability. That's what you gave me. And I love you for it." I took a shaky breath. "But now that you're older, you wonder if you missed out?" "Sometimes yes," he admitted. "But this isn't about choosing her or you. It's about realizing I never dealt with that regret. And when she showed up, I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't want to hurt you by dredging up the past, but I ended up hurting you anyway by keeping secrets." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Michael, do you still have feelings for her?" He looked out at the water. "I care about her as a person who was important in my youth. But I don't want to leave you for her, if that's what you're asking. I realize how it looks, but I swear it isn't that." We spent the evening cooking a simple dinner in the cabin's tiny kitchen. The atmosphere was uneasy, but there was also a strange intimacy in being forced to confront each other without distractions. After dinner we sat by the fireplace, the logs crackling. In the dim light, Michael reached for my hand. I let him hold it, though my guard was still up. "What about you?" he asked quietly. "Were you happy all these years?" The question caught me off guard. I didn't have a neat answer. My life was a tapestry of small joys and quiet contentment. But if I was honest, part of me had shut down certain dreams. In my youth, I'd loved painting, wanted to exhibit my work someday. Then we had kids, and life got busy, and I told myself it was enough just to keep the household running. I think I convinced myself that comfort was the same as happiness, I said, tears pricking my eyes. And maybe that's not entirely true. Or maybe it was, but now I realize there's more. He squeezed my hand. Could we find that more together? Without clinging to the past or chasing fantasies we missed. I stared at the flames dancing in the hearth, recalling how once upon a time, we used to dream about traveling to Europe, opening a small art gallery, or maybe even retiring by the sea. We'd let those dreams fade. "I'm scared it's too late," I whispered. He nodded. "I'm scared too. But I'd rather face that fear with you than pretend everything's fine." That night, we slept in the cabin's single bed, an uncomfortable closeness that dredged up both longing and hurt. At one point he put his arm around me. And I found myself crying softly into his shoulder. It wasn't a grand romantic reconciliation, more like two wounded people trying to see if they could still find solace in each other. The following day, we took a short drive to a nearby clearing where Michael said he and Laura once picked wildflowers. Standing there with him, I felt a stab of jealousy, but also a sense of acceptance. He was showing me the history he had with her, letting me see the place she once occupied in his heart. Instead of letting it be some forbidden memory, he was opening it up, allowing me to witness it. And oddly, that helped. We talked about what we wanted for the remainder of our lives. Big questions about how to keep growing, keep learning, keep passion alive. For the first time in years, we spoke freely about traveling, about me resurrecting my love for painting, about him possibly mentoring younger financial consultants part-time so he wouldn't feel restless. And about Laura. Yes. "What happens if she calls you again?" He swallowed. I told her I needed to end our contact. I think it's best for us to find closure on our own, separately. I could see the pain in his eyes, but also the resolve. He was choosing me and I was choosing to believe him. We returned home from the cabin feeling raw but cautiously hopeful. There was no overnight miracle. Trust takes time to rebuild, especially after secrets and near betrayals. Yet we had a new sense of clarity. We started to break our routines, trying small, spontaneous things like visiting an art gallery on a whim, or cooking a meal we'd never attempted before. I enrolled in a local painting class, and Michael seemed genuinely excited for me. He told me he was sorry he never pushed me to pursue my passion earlier, that he thought it wasn't his place to push. I realized I'd never asked for that push, content to slip into a supportive wife role without questioning if I wanted more. Of course, there were still moments when a phone call or text would jolt my anxiety, making me wonder if Elle was reaching out again. In those moments, Michael would show me his phone, letting me see there was nothing to hide. It felt awkward and a bit humiliating but also necessary. We had to establish a new foundation of honesty, no matter how uncomfortable. We also sought therapy for a while. Just a few sessions, enough to help us navigate the lingering resentment and fear. The counselor urged us to see this crisis as a wake-up call, an opportunity to reshape our relationship for the next chapter of our lives. That idea both terrified and excited me. I was 63, but maybe there was still time to discover new versions of ourselves and each other. One day, as we were cleaning out the attic, we found an old box of photos from our first years of marriage. We sat down on the dusty floor, flipping through images of our younger selves grinning at the camera, arms around each other as though the world was ours. I realized how many milestones we'd shared, how many storms we'd weathered, and that perhaps this latest storm could be a chance to deepen our bond rather than break it. Michael apologized again, tears welling in his eyes as he recalled how he'd nearly jeopardized us. I told him I was ready to let go of the anger, as long as we stayed open and honest moving forward. The day I received a friend request from Laura on social media was a test of that honesty. My heart leapt in my chest when I saw her name. I showed Michael immediately. He looked grim, but he didn't panic. He suggested we talk about it together. Did I want to accept to see what she had to say? Or should I ignore it? A part of me was curious, but I also felt we needed a clean break from her involvement in our lives. So I deleted it. It was a small act, but it felt like reclaiming our space. In the end, the scars remained. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, I'd wonder if he still thought about that carefree summer with her, if a piece of his heart would always belong to that memory. But I also believed that a piece of his heart firmly belonged to me, to the decades we'd shared, the children we raised, the home we built, and the everyday joys we found in each other. Maybe that was enough. Or maybe we'd keep striving for more, setting off on new journeys together. After all, it's never too late to revisit old dreams, or create new ones. Our life wasn't perfect, but it felt more alive now that we'd stopped sweeping our wants and regrets under the rug. And I realized that sometimes, heartbreak isn't the end of a marriage. It can be the spark that lights up the path toward genuine connection, if both people are willing to fight for it. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay tuned for more deep real-life stories. Life doesn't always give us neat endings, but every crisis can be a chance to rediscover who we are, and who we can become, when we're brave enough to face the truth.